This is Kevin Jones, curator of the FITA Museum at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. Welcome to this next iteration of Collection Conversations. I'm going to be joined today by the Associate Curator, Christina Johnson. I'm just watching for her to log in. And we're going to be talking about exhibitions, how it is that we do exhibitions, themes that we come up with, all those kinds of behind the scenes aspects. That then, it's always nice. We open the doors, we walk in, and everything looks gorgeous. Here's Christina. I'm going to invite her to join. Ooh. She is going to be logging in a second. So we get a lot of. Hello, Christina.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, I'm glad.
So we're talking today about exhibitions and how it is that, we at the FITA Museum, but also, curators all over the world kind of come up with ideas. What's the behind the scenes aspect of putting an exhibition together, those kinds of fun things. And Joanna Abajouti, our director of social media, she put out a question earlier this week, which we got a lot of responses to. And so Christina and I both have the questions in front of us. So we're going to be asking your questions that our viewers, thank you for joining today, are interested in. Also, while we're working, right now, if you have questions that we're not covering or something else, feel free to type them in, and we're watching the scrolling. So if we're able to get to one of your questions, fantastic, but we may also answer them as we go along this morning. And in the afternoon, of course, on the East Coast, and then the rest of the world in the evening. So, Christina, I'm just going to start off. The first question. How often do you, meaning the FITA Museum, change exhibitions?
Well, are you asking now in COVID-19 times, or are you talking about before this time? Because of course right now it's challenging and we do not know our in-house exhibition schedule. But previously, we did 1 to 2 Hollywood costume exhibitions a year, loan shows, our annual Art of Motion Picture Costume Design exhibition, which so many people love to attend. Every couple of years, we campus, and that has changed out maybe 2 times a year, focused on pieces from the museum's collection. We also like to focus on student work, and so generally there's a student exhibition each year, and then our Orange County campus has a satellite gallery that we change out between 1 and 2 times a year. So we're busy.
We are, and it's not just a matter of taking objects out of storage and slapping them into a gallery. There's so much that goes on because, the whole point of what we do is to tell a story, an educational story, that hopefully our students and our visitors will take away something that maybe they didn't know before, or will introduce them to a topic that they hadn't even thought of. And of course, for our students, to inspire them as the next generation of designers, whether it's fashion design or costume design, but also the textile design students, the interior design students, the graphic students, because so much of what we have in our collection has really fantastic graphic quality to it.
I also want to point out that it's not only in-house exhibitions we do, but we also loan to exhibitions around the world. And right now we have a piece on loan to the Brooklyn Museum of Art in their Studio 54 exhibition. And we have other loans in process. Again, everything is under discussion with COVID-19, but we also loan around the world to exhibitions.
Our peacock dress is also in Phoenix right now.
That's right. It's at Phoenix right now. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's true, Christina. It's like we don't know how we're going to be able to do things in the future. The idea is possibly that we're going to be opening our galleries again next year in April with our annual Hollywood costume exhibition. The Academy Awards usually takes place in February. We open that show generally at the very beginning of February, but next year the Academy Awards is going to be in later April. So, there's things, it's all up in the air. So we're just kind of working around, but hopefully once COVID is past us, we're all healthy and safe again. We will be able to generate the normal kind of schedule that Christina just laid out for us going into the future. We keep our fingers crossed. How is it that you decide what exhibitions you're going to do? Obviously, our annual Hollywood costume exhibition is always on our calendar. That's just a given. We work on that show every year. But what other kinds of shows are you interested in, Christina?
Well, the ideas for exhibitions, they really vary. Generally, it's from the curator's interest because, let's face it, we're going to be spending a lot of time immersed in the subject matter. Exhibitions
Right.
can take years to research and plan.
Right.
And then when we have an idea, you and I run it past each other. We would discuss it with our museum director. Oftentimes it's discussed with a museum board to make sure that that concept is something that is in line with our FIDM Museum mission statement and that our diverse community would be interested in seeing. But sometimes exhibitions kind of fall into our laps, like when we receive a large donation and we want to celebrate it sooner than later. And I'd like to talk about a 2015 exhibition that is an example of that, and that was called Inspired Eye, the Donald and Joan Damask Design Collection at the FIDM Museum. And we have a lot of memories to share about that. It started with an email to our info line, actually, and I remember when that came in and sharing it with you.
Right. I remember Donald Damask emailed that he had this incredible collection of illustrations and photographs and ephemera. And it was out of the blue, literally. We had not met Joan or Donald at that stage, and it's really unusual. I can't really think of another time where somebody has literally emailed to say, I have an entire collection of really incredible, important work that I'd like to just give to you,
Well, I remember we looked at it and we thought,
having known everybody before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. Without previously knowing them, but it was just out of the blue. And I remember that we went and visited them at their Southern California home, and he had described a collection that he had amassed over 30 years, including a very large Cecil Beaton collection, including drawings, photographs, first editions, lithographs, a large Willie Maywald collection, the famous photographer working in the haute couture, most notably with Dior and Balmain in the mid-20th century, many vintage clothing items and pieces of traditional fashion, and theatrical drawings. And so we went and looked, and they were so kind to invite us into their light-filled home with their books everywhere. And we went through things, and they told us that they were ready to let this go, that for them, they had enjoyed living with these pieces and being inspired by them, but it was time for students to be inspired by them. And they each had long careers in the fashion industry. Donald with many different companies, including vice president of marketing at Henry Bendel in the 1990s, and an executive at the Body Shop. And Joan also was head of knitwear sweater design at the May Company. So they used these pieces to inspire their own creative endeavors.
It's interesting to me that not only did their collection fit our mission statement of what it is that we collect, I mean, spot on. You can be offered something, but it could be completely off from what your institution's focus is. And that's, something we have to think about all the time whenever we take anything into the collection, because of course it takes, at least 8 hours to process something from beginning to end before it ends up in the collection storage. And also storage space is an issue. So, we have to be really careful what we take into the collection. And it's so unusual that really spot on every single object that Joan and Donald offered to us fit. And also fit in a way because it was a lot more modern pieces and so forth, the second half of the 20th century, but all the way up to, the early 2000s. And that's unusual for us too. And we because not a lot of people necessarily understand that we collect to the minute, so just because it's not old, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be interested in it for the collection. But it just absolutely fit. And not only the objects, but the people fit. I mean, Joan and Donald, having come out of the design and fashion world, I mean, it's like they were FIDM poster people.
Yes, it was a lovely fit. We've gotten to know them very well.
So, okay, we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about the Inspired Eye because that was
Yes.
really an extraordinary exhibition. We also can talk about, the shows that we have coming up too, such as Sporting Fashion. And so we'll get to some of that too. How do you decide on the themes within the exhibition? So you come up with an exhibition theme. Okay, it's wherever your museum is. It's motorcycles. For us, it might be dress of the 1960s or something. Now you have to break down that kind of big overarching theme into sections within a museum, almost like chapters in a catalog.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the first step is to immerse yourself in the subject, in secondary sources, in books, and also immerse yourself in the objects and see what you have to choose from. In the case of the Damas collection, the collecting themes, their personal collecting themes, lent themselves to ideal collecting categories. So I knew that we were going to do a Willie Maywald section, a Cecil Beaton section, vintage clothing and world dress. But when we met them, we weren't quite sure. Okay, how should we interpret all of this? And what was really wonderful is that when we went, there was another box that was not originally offered to us. And that was a large plastic container, very well organized, and it was filled with ephemera from Donald's career at Henry Bendel. So things like pieces of stationery he had designed, packaging, photographs from all the amazing parties, the designer parties, art he had commissioned for publicity. And we decided to introduce the exhibition with those pieces from his career. And it was wonderful to be able to take this bin, this plastic storage bin of his archival materials, and then select specific pieces to really talk about what he did at Bendel's.
And it's really wonderful, and it doesn't always happen when you have somebody to just talk to directly, ask all the questions that the objects are, when you're going through the objects, trying to figure out your themes, how the exhibition is going to be broke up, what the flow is going to be, but to be able to ask the person, how is it that you use this? Why did you come up with this design? What was the impetus?
That's right.
And that's not always the case. I mean,
no.
There's nobody left in the 19th century to talk to. We can only go to primary sources or objects or secondary research, but it's fantastic. And another exhibition actually that you're working on is Rudy Gernrich, and how incredible that you've been able to go to primary source. I mean, the actual people who worked and created these pieces. So,
but it's different with Rudy Gernrich. Many of the people from that generation are no longer with us. It's very different to work on a subject when you can't do oral histories. With the Damas, I could call them up and say, well, why'd you collect this? What do you think about this? Why is this in your collection? Let's talk about it. And it was a very different experience. And so from the beginning of that exhibition, I wanted to insert the collectors. Now, for you watching, Joanna has posted a number of photos of the Los Angeles Inspired Eye exhibition on our Instagram account, so you can go through and see some very beautiful photos of that. But for now, I have some printouts, and I'll show you this first one. Okay, this is the title wall. I'll do it very slowly. And you can see that there is a portrait of them that we commissioned, and this was taken in Grand Hope Park, just where FITM is located. And then there's a bookcase. Now, many of these books went into the FITM Museum Special Collection, but I personally had been inspired by their home and their own bookcases, and I wanted to replicate that because, let's face it, when you go to a dinner party or you see someone, or at least I do, I like to look at their bookcases. What books do they have? What picture frames? It tells you so much about them. And so we replicated it with a piece of plexi. So everything was protected. So people didn't think this was for browsing, because it wasn't. These are museum pieces. And I think it was very successful. I was very happy. And for the other themes, which included his inspired career at Bendel's, vintage clothing as inspiration, Maywald and Cecil Beaton, we included quotes from the collectors. For example, this platform that showcased pieces from Fortuny to 19th century Chinese dress, Armani's first collection for the United States, and Prada. We had a quote from Joan, and I'm going to tell you a secret. This image is actually backwards for me, so I have to read this other piece of paper. But her quote is, "Students should have their minds wide open to everything. Your output is only as good as your input. And I took that as a guiding force for this exhibition. The Bendel's materials that I told you about, those were placed in a case, and this is probably 2% of the collection of Bendel's ephemera that we have, but it made for a wonderful storyline. And it was just a really fun exhibition to work on.
You know, and it's similar for every exhibition. It doesn't matter what the topic is. This is the kind of generic breakdown that happens. You know, you have an overall theme, the objects you're going to use in the exhibition, or what objects do you need to find maybe to flesh out the exhibition? And then you start to just break it down. It's similar to what we're coming up with sporting fashion. You know, we were working on the catalog first because, of course, a catalog takes years and years, photography, writing, you know, just all the publication deadlines. And so we broke our catalog down to 8 themes. And then when we started to actually work on the design of the gallery and how that was going to be laid out, we just naturally took those themes and started to incorporate them into the sections of the exhibition. Now, not every exhibition, of course, has a catalog that would accompany it, but the working strategy is pretty much the same. It's breaking all of it, because exhibitions have a lot of information, can have a lot of objects, and you break it down into kind of bite-sized chunks that you can follow as you go along. And we need to keep going along because time is short. How long does it take to do research and find items for an exhibition?
Well, it varies, because with the damasks, it was you know, picking it up with art handlers, and we had the objects. Although research did take a little bit longer, but for something like Outdoor Girls, I mean, you have focused on that collecting endeavor for close to 15 years, pieces for that. So it does vary. Oftentimes, a museum will work with their own collection and perhaps acquire things to supplement.
Yep.
It just varies. You know, research takes a long time. It's different now than it was 20 years ago because so many primary sources are digitized, and that does help. Like, I can do a keyword search into Vogue or Harper's Bazaar, and if I'm lucky, the original editorial will come up from a piece in the Fitta Museum's collection. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago, I would have to literally flip through each page of that magazine. So now it varies. Is something digitized, or do you have to make a research appointment or access it in physical form?
Even when we started the research for literally writing sporting fashion, and that was about 6 years ago that we actually started to write, there was even less available, you know, a lot of digitized sources, but it's amazing how as we were going along, more and more information kept pouring out and becoming available. And, you know, it really does pay to invest, and it's an investment, whether you're working on something as a contract curator or if you're at a brick and mortar institution, but to have access to, you know, newspapers.com. It's really kind of that simple to be able to access so much information. I remember, Christina, you did this absolutely fantastic paper on the Spanish influence on the robe de steel, that 1920s kind of hoop skirt shape. And you spent hours and hours and hours going through microfiche. I don't even know if our younger audience members today would know what microfiche.
Yeah, you're dating me. When I was in grad school, Vogue and another source I use, the New York Times, those were not on digital databases, right? Where you can put in a keyword or a phrase and, you know, lo and behold, 1,000 hits come up. No, I went to the basement of NYU's library where there was microform, which is almost like a piece of film where the larger page has been made quite small, and you put it into a reader and it blows it up on the screen. And I would just spend hours, by the way, no keyword search, reading all the lines. And it makes such a difference, this online age that we're in what we're able to interpret for our audience.
It makes me appreciate the curators who came before us years ago at institutions, and how in the world they did these huge monograph books or huge exhibition catalogs and literally had to read page by page. I don't know how they had
also with no email access. I mean, picking up the phone or writing letters. When you see these books that were published in the mid-20th century and before, that was a huge amount of time invested for that end result.
Exactly. So we actually have an example of this. Can you show your image first?
Okay, let me see if I got the right one for where you're leading me on to.
Luella.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But let me tell a little story about this first. So first,
Okay.
let me show this image. Okay, can you see it? It's just a piece of paper. My great aunt was a hoarder. And one of the things she hoarded was vintage newspaper clippings. And, you know, she was about 30 years old in the 30s, 40 in the 1940s. And I came across this in a box of clippings as I was quickly going through things and honestly just throwing it all out after she passed away. And I came across this and I thought, oh, I recognize this. I totally recognize this. This piece is quite similar to a piece in the Fitta Museum's collection. And I brought it in to show you, I remember.
Yeah. And it's by Luella
That's
Ballerino
right.
in the 1940s. And she was this absolutely fantastic designer of American sportswear. And one of the few women who did not just work for a company as a designer, but actually had her own company with her name, Luella Ballerino, on the label. And she took inspiration from all over the world. We would maybe now say appropriation, but it was definitely inspiration too. And so she came up with this really great outfit, which we have in the collection, and we had planned to use it in sporting fashion. But you know, how do you go about styling something and making it correct? So it was incredible to see that original image.
And I should say that this is like a clipping from a magazine, which because of the font on it, it's probably like Harper's Bazaar.
Right. So our cute computer, or the printer, got a little bit excited about this, and this is a huge picture. But here is our styling of our Luella Ballerino outfit. We used exactly the original design, you know, styling and outfit to then bring about an absolutely authentic, correct display. You know, to put the ensemble on display, but as it would have been seen in the day. Now, we don't have the luxury every single time of being able to present something exactly as it was done in its own day, because we don't have, you know, the actual photograph of the ensemble. So that's one of those kind of serendipitous aspects, you know, and that's the thing about, you know, working on projects and exhibitions and catalogs. We are thinking about the future. We're always planning way ahead. Yes, sporting fashion has taken about 15 years to put together, but in the meantime, we did the Fabulous exhibition. We did the Betsy Bloomingdale exhibition. We founded the Fashion Council. We fundraised for the Larson collection, the peacock dress, the Josephine gown. I mean, there's all these other things that are going on at the same time. It's not just one project. And of course, we're working on major exhibitions and catalogs, you know, for 10 years from now, let's hope. So while we're researching one thing, and out of the blue, some information might come up that's exactly what we need for another project down the road.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we got to move on. When you do display, what type of advisors do you consult to both preserve the pieces, but also to accurately display a time period? Very, very interesting question here.
Well, in terms of preservation, we have a conservator we work with, and you know, we would never undertake repairs ourselves. We're not trained conservators, and her work always takes quite a bit of time, but we're very lucky to have that resource.
And right, Christina and I, we don't know everything. I know that's a surprise.
I can't believe you just said that.
We don't. But, you know, we do know a lot about our field. Christina and I specialize really in the American sportswear and high fashion, 19th century, 20th century. But, you know, there's something that I don't know a lot about, and that's military dress.
That's right.
So yes, when we were going through our collections, you know, we have this collection of military dress. I really don't know anything about it. So we brought in a military expert to go through our collection to say, hey, are these uniforms, are they complete? Are they not right? You know, so there's an aspect of bringing in somebody for a project that we might be working on that is a part of something we don't know about because we're always learning ourselves.
That's right, absolutely. And it reminds me of the Korean traditional dress show that the Fit Museum hosted some years ago.
Right.
And the staff, did not know about the hanbok and invited scholars in to help us select pieces, interpret them, and
Right.
make sure that we were interpreting them correctly for the community. I love learning new things and reaching out to other scholars. You can never go wrong with inviting more input into the subject that you're studying.
And that exhibition, the Korean exhibition, had been part of a larger traveling exhibition, and that it was about 2000 and was overseen by the previous curator of the museum. Well, what are the stages of building an exhibition? Okay, let's literally get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Okay.
From concept to reality. We've kind of talked about the concept aspect. All of that kind of takes place in our offices, behind closed doors.
Sure.
Our gallery really isn't involved in it yet because there's so much preparation that goes into doing something before you literally start building it in. And I would say, the first aspect of the nuts and bolts is the conservator.
Yes.
Once we have objects chosen or themes, or we're researching, and all of this is happening, simultaneously. There's kind of overlaps, but you have to have a conservator kind of get involved because are there pieces that are going to need stabilization at the shoulders or something, or are special mounts? Do you need to create special mounts for an object? To be able to put it on display. So, kind of a conservator is a first,
definitely looking at the object stability and what can and cannot be displayed in person. And then I would say also having your strong object list completed. So there's a lot of computer work in the museum world. There's lots of Excel spreadsheets, there's many Word documents, there's lots of taking reference photos and measurements. So you do need to have a 100% correct object list with measurements to be able to take to your exhibition designer. And then you have a conversation. You have a conversation about, if they're not familiar, what the topic involves, what the curator's vision might be. Generally, you might provide some adjectives, some description. So for example, in the Inspired Eye exhibition, I was inspired by their art-filled home. I wanted it light and airy, welcoming, clean and classic. So you have those conversations, and the designer with vision will take those ideas and create an amazing experience for people using a lot of computers again. And that would be like InDesign, CAD, and they literally will take the pieces on your object list and they will insert them into the spaces. And it's just a lot of dialogue back and forth with that. Once you have something on the computer or on paper, then you might make a 3D model of it, because that works really well to cut out small images of pieces and then perhaps foam core them and move them around the gallery.
I'm really amazed by designers, exhibition designers, graphic designers, because most of the time we're approaching our designers and they have no clue what it is that we're talking about. It's not a topic that they have researched themselves. So we're presenting all of this information to them, and then they're able to synthesize it and break it down and simplify it. And actually, that's one word I would say, to use often with any project you're working on is to simplify. Yeah. You can do pie in the sky everything when you're working on it in a concept phase, but you got to bring it down to reality, and it's always good to simplify.
Let the object speak. Let the object speak first and foremost. Always.
And have air too.
And have airspace. Yes,
around
have room to breathe and take it in visually.
Exactly, and that's where you have a great designer. They can really transform and help you to see what you're looking at, but through somebody's eyes out of left field. They can say, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand what's the point of this part, or what, this idea is not going to work because of this and this and this physical reason. It can't be built the way you were thinking about it, but hey, why don't we try this? So it becomes a dialogue, and that's one of the things that is the most important, is a dialogue, because you and I have to talk to each other constantly, but it's also all the outside people, and it's a gallery designer, but it's also our registrars and all of that who have to track all of this information, and
the mount makers. you know,
Mount
an outside
makers.
mount
Yep.
maker or internal mount maker. Again, more spreadsheets for that.
Yeah. A
Lighting
coordinator who
designers.
has to make sure that all the timetables are working because you and I can kind of dive in a little too deep sometime, and we realize that like other people have to get their job done. That means we have to have our stuff finished for them to then be able to continue moving on with the planning of an exhibition. So it really, once it becomes the nuts and bolts time period, it's no longer just hours
Yes,
to
you do need
talk
to
to.
let it go because it
You
will
do.
only be improved with input
Right.
from peers.
Right, through other eyes looking at something. I do have a couple of photos regarding kind of just the nuts and bolts. This is an image of our gallery, kind of in 3 dimension. This is literally a foam core model, and I'm sorry it's not the full gallery. It's a kind of a detail shot. So it's this full gallery that you and I and the gallery designer, we stand over it, look at it, to see what the physical reality is going to be for our viewers and students walking through.
It's difficult to see scale on that photo, but it's quite large, and it
It
takes a while
is.
to walk around it. You could see a bit of a
It's
table poking out.
It's an
It's a large
inch per foot,
model.
so
Yeah.
it's a big model. And then also here's kind of another detail shot of platform layouts that we were working on. Our gallery designer took photos. We provided him all of the photos of all of the objects, either a mannequin, full mannequin dress, or cased objects, and he printed those out to scale again. And we literally, and he made little foam core people, and we literally just move them around the gallery as we are trying to figure out refining our themes, finally seeing the objects kind of physically in place next to each other, like what will work, or we have way too many objects on that platform.
Yeah.
There's no way it's going to read well. So we either have to move things around. We also did eliminate some objects out of the exhibition because there just really wasn't space. They're in the catalog, but they're not going to be in the exhibition.
And then I have some documentation, the next step. So that's inputting the physical design and the dialogue that we're having into a computer-generated program. And so the portion that Kevin was showing you with those tiles is actually, this is the same thing. This is the same room, the same space, but it is our gallery with the exact measurements of the various platforms, the various types of building materials that were planned for that section. And then afterwards, this is pretty amazing, those same flat tiles that you saw and that 3D space that I just showed you can be populated by photos of the actual mannequins or objects as well as visitors for scale. And that's an example of this, so that you can really see if the placements work, how much space is around, so you can walk through the gallery before it is even installed.
And that's something that is so visually important, and because it takes a lot of time and money, energy, resources to build an exhibition, and so you got to plan it down to literally the last screw, being drilled into a platform. But also something that's really important is, sometimes exhibitions travel. They don't always just live at whatever institution developed the idea, but it's to share the love and to share our objects with people around the country or sometimes even around the world. And to take those digital renderings and to be able to pass them on to another institution that might be borrowing your exhibition is really, really important, because it gives them a sense of what they can do walking through, but also then to morph that space that you had the concept for and you created into their own environment, because not every institution has the same floor plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we are going to move on. How many people work to build an exhibition, and what are their job titles?
Okay, well, it really, pardon? It
Well,
really
we talked
varies.
about an exhibition designer, curators, a registrar. Who else might work on something like this?
Well, of course, it will vary per museum. In some museums, you may have multiple people with the same job description because there are multiple exhibitions taking place.
Right.
Obviously, you have installers. You also have the construction crew who comes in and does the actual building, the painting, building things according to code. And that's when the installers, we actually pause. You know, it does take time to do the physical construction. And so we cannot move objects in before
Right.
it's clean and all of that. Now, we're a smaller museum, so in terms of staff. And so we do a little bit of everything. You and I both dress. We can also install pieces, so literally putting on my knee pads, my smock, and taking a drill and drilling in the mannequin with team support, or wiring mannequins. We do it all.
And, you know, it's important, I think you touched on something about the aspect of building in the gallery. You know, there's more time that takes, because, you know, if you're building something, you're painting the gallery, everything has to off gas. Obviously, the paint has to dry, but we have to give a certain amount of time before we can even start to take objects into the gallery space, to just wheeling them in, not even placing them yet. So there is so much behind the scenes aspects that take place that are not obvious necessarily, I think, to visitors when they walk into a space, because, you know, it's all done. It's you know, it's like walking into somebody's house. You don't see the moving trucks and all of that. You just see the really great artwork on the wall. So and there are contract workers definitely that then have to be hired. There are specialty mount makers. You know, there are graphics that have to be put up on the wall. Not the graphic design, which would be done by your designer, but you have all the vinyls, all the text, the words. There might be like almost like wallpaper, scenographic. All of that has to be, you know, thought about, but then physically put in. And some of that takes a long time. So all of that aspect has to be calculated, moving backwards from your opening date, to make sure that you have enough time and people to be able to do that, and that you're not bumping into each other. Like, okay, the paint's still wet,
Yes.
but I got to put my objects in. We know that's not going to happen.
We always have these, you know, large calendars with multiple organizational fields with all the jobs that everyone is doing for our exhibitions. And I'll also mention that once an exhibition opens, the work is not done, because there is still maintenance. We need to go in every day and make sure that there are no light bulbs burnt out, dust cases, check insect mitigation issues. So much. There's so much to do. So it's
and as our FITA Museum is telling us right now, don't forget about all the promotions, the programming, you know, all of that takes place. We really don't do handheld invitations anymore. You know, everything we try to do is digital, because it's more cost effective. And it's quicker to do. But, you know, we do have to have posters created,
yes.
Signage created outside of our gallery to direct our students and to direct our visitors of
the branding images. It's quite a conversation. And I actually have an example from when we did more works on paper. This is the Inspired Eye, and this is backwards. I didn't print it out. This is literally from my little scrapbook. The Inspired Eye postcard, which this was the branding image. It took a while to think of what branding image we should have. We ultimately went with a drawing by David Crowland. I love the 90s aesthetic and just the face. I thought it was quite inviting and fun and energetic. So there's all that time involved, not only in selecting your object list and making sure construction is going well, but also all of that branding image, all of that publicity as mentioned.
And we have a museum shop as well, a director, Judy, and she needs to know early on also what it is that we're planning, what's going to be in the exhibition, what are our themes, what are the key elements, the key objects maybe, the point, you know, as you're walking along the storyline of the exhibition, because she needs to order or commission products for the museum shop that are going to relate to the theme of the exhibition, whether it's ordering books from other vendors or such as the sporting fashion exhibition, we have our big, huge outdoor girls scarf, and everybody wants the scarf. So we've been looking into, you know, and it's going to be in the exhibition, but also replicating the scarf so people can buy it in the museum shop. And that's not just our shop, but it's possibly other museum shops as the exhibition is traveling over the next 3 years.
And
so all of that has to take place too.
And just as there are fads in fashion, there are also fads in museum shop products. So one year postcards are really in, the next year it's all about note cards and no one wants the postcards, or maybe it's the
Right.
magnets or the pins, and then the pins are out of, you know, season. So there's also fads in product.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, so there's all of these elements that are swirling around all at the same time, and
The
everything is
curator.
yeah,
Right.
the curator, right? Uh, Trying to not look, you know, frazzled. But it's all about that date, that opening date.
Well, and
It's
I
like
will
the date is
say,
looming.
you know, you have your opening date, opening to the public. Generally, there's an opening event, a party, possibly the night before, the weekend before, and a press preview. So that date doesn't change. So you may need to work really long hours. There have certainly been days and nights where you and I, and possibly our gallery director, have been the only people in the gallery. I remember one scene at 2 a.m., which I do not care to relive. Words were exchanged between us. Still love
Yeah,
you. But you basically just do what you need to do in order to get it finished on time. And exhibitions are a huge time commitment.
they are. They are. Because it is not a 9 to 5 job.
No.
Definitely when you're in that last, probably 2 weeks, really, when it's ramping up before your opening. There is literally no concept of time except for one date.
Yes.
Very, very
The one
soon in the
date.
future, the one date. So yeah, exactly. You know, and so to go back to how many people does it take to build an exhibition, their job titles, you touched on it. Really, it varies per institution. You know, there are, you know, museums like the Met who have vast staff, and it's very hierarchical, and you've got people who just move objects around the museum space. Whereas, you know, there could be a small historic house museum that has that changes displays, and they may have 1 or 2 people that have to do everything. So it is fantastic to have a broad sense, to try to gain as a broad sense as possible of what various functions within the museum are. Not everybody's a curator. Not everybody wants to be a curator. There are definitely people who are like, their world is mount making. And that is really highly specialized, and it is absolutely 100% important in the museum field because, of course, it's to protect your objects as they're on display safely, you know, but also visually very beautiful, so you can see what it is that needs to be pointed out. You know, and so but it really is fantastic to have a full panoply of the workings of a museum, because that's going to make wherever you land in a museum that much richer, because you also have empathy for your fellow workers, right, and the things that they have to go through. So, all right. So we have a question. Christina and I really talked about this last night, just, you know, discussing how we would answer this, what visuals we could bring out. And the question is, how do you shape the mannequins to fit the garments? And we decided not to cover that this time because it's its own topic.
Mannequins are a topic
Do that as its own. It's its own. And why?
So many themes and exciting ideas in your head, and you realize that you do have a finite amount of time, so you need to prioritize those topics. Yeah. I've shared before that I am lead curating a Rudy Gernrich exhibition, in part because, and catalog, in part because the Fitta Museum does own his archive. I have a personal interest in that because he was based in Los Angeles. I was also born in Los Angeles, and I enjoy learning about our city and culture. I also have an interest in straw in fashion from the 18th century all the way to the present. So it seems a little random, but I think it's quite beautiful. And I have an ideal exhibition title in my head, so I'll throw it out there: Straw, Nature's Golden Thread. And so we have been collecting off and on. Oh, I'm glad you like that. We have been collecting off and on pieces to do that. That would be, I think, a wonderful history gallery rotation. I love 19th century American folk art and 20th century also. And so we would like to have a rotation on folk art and fashion. and really take time to perhaps redefine what folk art is in fashion and broaden people's understanding of folk art. So I'm super excited about that too. You know, if a curator has an interest in something and it sparks something and they have the resources to make it happen, it's going to be successful, you know?
Right. Because there's a passion behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just some random ideas that are percolating right now, and there's
Right.
more.
You know, and like you said, one of the things that I think really hit us is how long it takes to do a project, and you have to really be picky and choosy if you have the ability to do an exhibition, because it takes so long, and you can only do so many exhibitions in a career lifespan.
Exactly.
So you better choose something that you're really passionate about. Now, I also think it's fantastic that we and other institutions have the ability to do larger exhibitions, which take so much time, but that also we can do focus, almost like boutique exhibitions, not pop-ups, because I think of that as kind of popping up in a mall or something like that. But boutique exhibitions, you know, we have a history gallery, and we kind of know that 15 mannequins max fit in that gallery space. And then we can have cases with accessories and so forth. So it's really easy to think about how to tailor an exhibition theme, like straw. I would love to do it. And we have acquired some really beautiful straw
Although
embroidered
we need
garments.
some more contemporary pieces. So
We do.
I'm going to be bringing some pieces to your to your
Yeah.
desk.
Right. And you know, that's the thing, is like that is a perfect kind of really focused topic. That's not something that we would do necessarily as a full 3 huge gallery exhibition.
You know, in terms of museum exhibitions, certainly there are some topics that have been done over and over. Think about
Right.
Dior, Chanel, just certain topics. But what makes them different is the organization and the objects that are shown. Or you can do exhibitions that have not been done before. You know, I mean, there's still so much that can be done in our field, and it's a really exciting time.
We did, and I'm not saying this is going to be an exhibition that's going to happen, but we did a small wedding gown installation when we were working on the Helen Larson fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do a wedding gown exhibition that takes up all of our galleries, because we have an absolutely incredible wedding gown collection.
We do.
I mean, just phenomenal. In fact, just donated to us. It was a custom-made wedding full ensemble by Norma Kamali, 1987. Absolutely extraordinary. And I'd love to show it off. You know, curators want to show off their objects. They want to get them out. That's the whole point, is to share and educate people. And, you know, it's frustrating that we can't do more and more and more, but we have limited time, you know, limited space. But it's exciting that we have Outdoor Girls on its way. We have already started photography for the Rudy Gernreich. We're about a third of the way through the photography, and I'm just telling everybody, it's absolutely gorgeous. You're going to love Christina's right there for me. You're going to love what Christina is doing, because it's absolutely flippin' unbelievable. So something really fun to look forward to. And then, of course, I'll mention one other project that we are working on actively, though we have not yet started photography for the catalog, but we have started some research and pulling in some experts, as kind of we talked about earlier. You know, there are different ways of doing exhibitions where Christina and I do the show. We're the two people, but we want to work on a project where we invite scholars from all over the world, and we almost act as editors of the exhibition and the catalog. And that is on a topic, kind of as you mentioned, Christina, that it's happened before, but it's never happened for us, or the way that we would do it, on the Paris haute couture and industry at the early stages. So it's really the first 50 years of the couture. And we have been collecting for the last 20 years really extraordinarily beautiful examples of this highest kind of form of the needle arts, of embroidery, of construction, of design, of textile manufacture, all of that. But we also want to talk about the industry itself, and not just Worth,
the big names that you hear about over and over.
Yeah,
it's time to expand it.
Exactly.
It's time to expand it.
That's something that for you and I has always been a key note in any project we've done, is how do we expand what is thought of about whatever the topic is. You know, we've got sporting fashion coming up. We have ensembles in sporting fashion that, you know, at one point in my life I would have thought, but that's not sportswear. We have expanded that definition of what sporting fashion is, but we've been able to do it with the primary source material, and all the research that we've done to put everything in context. So again, those are some of the ideas that we have that we're working on. And you know, some of those shows may come about, some may not. We don't know. COVID has shown all of us that, you know, plan, but always have a backup plan as well.
That's right. I mean, exhibitions are changing because of COVID, and we know that we can always do publications, that exhibitions will certainly be a possibility, perhaps slightly changed, a changed format. You know, we need to think about exhibitions only having one path so that people don't go back. There's just things, and making sure that there's space that people can have between themselves. So a new world, but a world that we will navigate.
Yeah, and you know, something, you talk about planning an exhibition, and then that nuts and bolts aspects, and then suddenly something out of the blue changes the entire aspect of a way you were going to present information. In sporting fashion, we have a lot of auxiliary information that we can't just put on the platforms, such as our Women in Focus. We were trying to figure out how to incorporate them in a dynamic way, but also just standing in front of a mannequin that has 8 elements, 8 objects that have been acquired for your museum by your various supporters over the years. How do we present that information to our public? And we were going to have iPads, you know, and you could scroll through and you could, like, I want to see, give me more information about the hat that mannequin is wearing. Well, all of that information would be on the iPad. Well, now we don't want iPads because nobody wants to touch these things over and over and over. So we're figuring out ways of doing like QR codes now, where our visitors are walking through the one-way direction of the exhibition, and they can download all of that information that would have been on an iPad and just scroll at their leisure and find whatever information that they want. And also they can take that information with them, and it will live on our website forevermore.
The digital version of the exhibition.
The digital. So here is, you know, something, a pandemic, such a horrible world situation that is forcing all of us to rethink how to present and how to do things. And this is going to be a wonderful thing down the road because it will incorporate new strategies, new ideas, new ways of looking at things and presenting information in a digestible way, but also it maybe can live past the exhibition. And that's something that we're excited about. Okay, so actually, we kind of answered, like, how do you see fashion curate changing down the road?
Well, this time has gone quickly. Only have 5 more minutes. We need to select our last question.
Exactly. Okay, so there's last two questions. What is your favorite part in making an exhibition, Christina?
My favorite part is, after all the hard work, the late nights, working with a team, giving years of yourself to this, as a curator, walking into the gallery 10 minutes before the exhibition opening, or possibly the day after, you know, and just taking a moment. Usually this happens with you, since we team curate just about everything at the Fiddle Museum, and just taking a moment and thinking, oh my God, this was in my mind and now it's realized. And I am so lucky to be doing this in my life. Just to have that moment, it's like a very quiet moment that I always look forward to doing when it happens. And it's just very, very special to know that this is my offering. Like, this is my offering to the public, and the public, I hope, will enjoy seeing this, that it will bring them joy.
Mine is acquiring objects. I'll just go right to it. I like the stuff. I like the stuff. And, you know, I enjoy figuring out how to find what it is that we need, you know, to fill a hole in our collection, but also something that's needed to tell part of the story of whatever the exhibition
well,
is.
And I can attest to this because of all the texts and emails I receive at very strange hours saying, oh, Christina, what do you think about this? Oh, oops, I already bought this.
Yeah, exactly. We were having an all-staff Zoom meeting yesterday with our director and all that, and while we were having the Zoom meeting, I acquired an object, which is going to
With our
arrive.
director's support.
She did. She knew about it, and actually, she's being very generous, and she's underwriting it for us.
Yes,
Thank you,
it's a
Barbara.
great piece.
We love you.
Thank you.
And it's supposed to arrive on Monday, and we are going to be showing it off, hopefully next week for everybody, because it has everything to do with vote, vote, vote.
Yeah, so watch out for our social media.
Right, exactly. Okay, last question. What exhibition, Christina, when you were a little girl, affected you the most and kind of took you on the path that you are on now?
You know, it's not when I was a little girl. I think what I would say is when I saw the Alexander McQueen exhibition at the V&A, we were there with London, when we were there with Fashion Council. I don't know why I was there on my own. I think you were with Fashion Council doing something else, and I was there.
You were doing research.
I was speaking in a conference and doing research. But anyway, I had been so disappointed to miss it in New York, and so I went to the V&A. I was thrilled, and I walked through. Of course, I was impressed, and then I made the turn, and I walked into the Cabinet of Curiosities room. And it was basically, for those of you who don't know, it was a huge room filled with custom-sized cabinets with many, many different McQueen accessories and mannequins. And it was so beautiful and so moving, beautiful music. It was just this experiential thing that you would never get online. You know, there's lots of positives about online exhibitions, but you would never get the feelings, because to know that this beauty, these emotions came from him, and that he had decided to end his life and that we would not have any more of this, was just one of the most profound things I think I've ever experienced in my life. And I remember standing there, my breath was taken away, and just like tears, you know, it was so beautiful. So
I felt the same way in that room.
That's the power of an exhibition.
Phenomenal.
That's absolutely the power of museums and exhibitions.
Right. Since we're almost over, mine was a little earlier. In fact, it was more than 40 years ago for me, because I was a little boy. I was fortunate that my parents loved to take driving trips across the United States. So every summer we drove somewhere across the United States on our summer vacation. And I feel, in the station wagon, whatever. And, I'm just so grateful that my parents, did that, because I got to see a lot of the United States. And of course, I always wanted to visit a museum, and we went to Washington, D.C. one year, and this was in 1979, I think, 78 or 79. And we got to go to the Smithsonian, and I got to go in to see the first ladies' gowns. And in fact, Christina, this is a book.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
You gave to me for Christmas in 2003.
Yes.
You signed it for me. And, I remember specifically getting to see Mary Lincoln's gown on display. And this was made by Elizabeth Keckley, who was a very famous dressmaker in Washington, D.C. at this time, and became a really close friend of Mrs. Lincoln. And I remember this gown because it was in the period rooms. They don't exist anymore. They created all these period rooms that the mannequins were in, and next to it was a rosewood table, a carved like belter table, with Mary Lincoln's tea service on top. That is literally seared into my little Kevin kid mind, and it's something I think about often, because it really did. I had no idea about being a curator. I had no idea about this world, but it's something that I absolutely just was drawn to, and I feel really blessed that the path of life took me to the FIDA Museum, and that I actually get to do these projects, which, affected me as this little kid now so many years ago. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got to go. We're literally about to cut off. Thank you, Christina.
Bye, everyone.
Two weeks from now, I will be interviewing Mona May, Hollywood costume designer, and we're going to be talking about some fun things, and it's the day before Halloween, so it's going to be spooky. Okay, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.